My name's John David. If you're watching this video, odds are you're in the middle of your first year of teaching. The first year of teaching is a special time in every educator's life, full of laughter, fun, and excitement. Why, I remember my own first year like it was just last year. Oh, shit. Great memories. Look, I know I made that look easy, but let's be real. The first year of teaching is a really tough time for a budding educator. I mean, I know this is a job that just anybody could walk off the street and do just as well as we can, right? But in order to be a thoughtful and intentional educator, you've really got to know a lot of strategies that can help build bridges between your kids and their goals. Now, in particular, when I was hired at my school a week before the school year started, I had absolutely no idea that 3 out of my 5 classes were going to be teaching students with learning differences. So all of a sudden I found myself in a position where I felt very ill-equipped to do my job. Because let's be real, okay? These are things that we talk about in our education classes, but creating that out in the field is a completely different experience, okay? Now, before I get into like strategies like you might read in a textbook, the first thing that I really need to say is that the best educator for our students with learning differences is a real human being that's able to listen and learn from their students, okay? The very first thing that you've got to do if you want to be an effective teacher is take off that ego and just put it to the side, okay? And I don't mean like get rid of your ego like, you know, forgetting that like you're maybe amazingly brilliant and like stunningly gorgeous. But what I'm really talking about is that you need to be able to put the way that you think about the world and everything that you know to the side and really evaluate where your student's coming from on like a whole student level. And that's the ultimate #1 piece of advice that I can give you, okay? So if you can do that, then you're on the right track. But as far as more kind of traditional strategies go, let's talk about what works. Okay, so #1. When I first found that I was going to be teaching 3 learning difference sections, the very initial thought that I had was like, okay, I got to go out, I have to assess all this technology, we're going to go high tech with this, you know what I mean, we're going to change some lives through Google, we're going to make this happen, you know? And I'll tell you what I found has actually worked. After all the research that I've done, after everything that I have, you know, every PD hour that I have sat through with like tears of blood coming out of my eyes, this is what I have to tell you. Color coding. Color coding. Right? So when I discovered that color coding worked, it was like my going from black and white vision to color vision. I mean, okay, don't even take my word for it. Check these out. So first I'm going to show you an example of some distributive property notes that are in black and white. Okay, so notice, all the mechanics are here. Everything that you need to know is here. We've got multiplication over an addition or subtraction sign. We're not combining unlike terms. You know, we're going through all the steps that we need to be successful with these sorts of problems. Okay, now, I want you guys to take a look at these color notes real quickly. Okay, can you all see the difference? I mean, on a visual level, on a completely visual level, students are going to respond to this mostly because they can see the mechanics of exactly what's going on without having to think super hard about it. This is creating that step process on a very intuitive level, and I find that most of my students with learning differences are very concrete and very visual learners, and this gives them something to really kind of sink their teeth into, and that really takes advantage of all of the highlights of their learning styles. So this is something that I really recommend you trying out in your classroom. Now on to strategy #2. So the next thing that I want to talk about is actually a math-specific strategy. So all you English people, you know, just go read a book or whatever you do, okay? Because this is for the math people only. You guys understand? I do think that this could be applicable in a lot of different fields, but I have to say that after really studying the model, it was developed for math, and I think that it's most successful in math. And that's what's called CSA. Okay, CSA stands for concrete, semi-concrete, abstract. And it's just the idea that, especially when you're working with students with learning differences, you want to put something in their hands first. They're going to help them scaffold to that theoretical or abstract representation that you've got there at the end. Because I will say this from experience, if I start by just writing something up on the board and there's nothing to connect that to in real life, I have already lost my class before that pen even hits the board, you know. So you really just want to be conscious of, again, teaching to the styles of the students that you have in your class. And I will say that overwhelmingly, students that are identified as having learning differences are very, very concrete learners. So the way that this works is this. You would first work on a project that's a manipulative or something that you can put in your students' hands, a concrete version of whatever you're trying to talk about. And then next you would actually kind of shift your learning so that they're doing something maybe with that real life model, but they're doing it on paper. So they're kind of shifting, they're scaffolding, they're moving from this concrete thing they had in their hands to now representing that on a more theoretical level. And then finally, we move into that completely abstract representation. And that's your last step. So the idea is that you start with something in their hands and eventually you shift into something on a piece of paper. Okay, this next one is something that's like the bane of my existence, but I'm gonna tell you anyways, because I think that it's a tool that can be used either for good or for evil, and that is developing steps to help students solve problems. Now, I will be the first person to tell you that as a math teacher, I'm not into algorithms, I'm not into plug and chug, that's what we used to call it when I was back in school, back in the day. I'm really not in this thoughtless process of just solving math problems for the answer, right? I really want authentic questions, and I want students to think about things on an intuitive level and, you know, think their way through. Okay, but let's be real. There's only so many minutes in a year, right? And I do count my instructional time in minutes, so I mean, I can tell you, only so many minutes in a year, and you've got a lot to convey to those students that you want to convey on a really deep level. And part of the way that you do that is by developing steps. But what I've found specifically in classes with students with learning differences is that you have to be very careful about using clear, concise language and making sure that your steps are kind of self-contained and like succinct enough to really tell the whole story, but also get them through the process. Okay, because here's the deal. When students can't begin to know how to solve a problem, they're going to shy away from that problem. But as soon as you give them a framework or like reference points that they can use as they're going through something, that's going to make the difference in their confidence levels, and it's going to allow them to take risks that they really didn't feel prepared for. Alright, so now we got to talk about the big D in the room, and that's differentiation. Okay, so today I want to tell you guys a strategy that, other than asking an open-ended question, which I always highly recommend, bonus tip, this is the #1 strategy that I found that really helps when I have students just all over the board ability-wise, okay? And it's just a great way to be able to reach a whole classroom all at once, and that is creating assessments with graduated difficulty. Okay, so this is the strategy behind this whole thing. If you start with the easiest problems and then you shift to the most difficult ones at the end, it kind of acts as like a safety net for students, and they're going to go as far as they can and get stuck at a particular point. And that's really helpful to you as an assessor, because the assessee is going to be telling you more or less exactly where they're having problems with the material. So if you're really intentional with the way that you set up these sheets, you're actually going to find that students are just flat out going to tell you exactly what they know and exactly what they don't know. Especially because you could have like 30 students in your classroom and literally have every single student on a completely separate problem and concept at the same time. That's different. If that's not differentiation, I don't know what is. I don't even know what it could be. That's like teacher nirvana. Okay, you finally almost made it to the end of this video, but I've got one last tip that I want to share with you. And again, is this something that you could pull out of every single teaching textbook? Absolutely. But what works? Reflection works. So I know that you guys are probably thinking, you're like, this guy teaches math, you know, like why would he have people write words? This is a weird thing. One of the coolest things I feel like I've been able to do is kind of maintain a perspective as being the anthropologist that I actually am, like in a math classroom. So what I've found is that when students take time to really think about what they've learned, think about things on a metacognitive level, and then they just write 1 or 2 sentences memorializing that, that's where you're going to be way further ahead the next day with your slow processors. That's where you're going to be way ahead the next day with people who will go home and come back and literally remember nothing that you've done. One rule that I have in my classroom is if a student can say it, I'm going to have a student say it instead of me saying it. I just find that my classes run a lot better with that philosophy in mind. But I'll tell you, the gold standard is if a student says it themselves and writes it to themselves the next day, watch what's about to happen. Okay, so now we've talked about a lot of strategies that I've found to work in my classroom, and especially with students with learning differences. So that means that you've got one more thing to do before this video is over. Pop quiz, yeah! Okay, so here's what I want you to do. I'm gonna give you about 30 seconds, and I want you to just reflect in your mind about what you've learned in this video, or just what I've discussed in this video if you haven't learned anything. So, I'm waiting. Done yet? Let's review. Okay, so just to do a general overview of everything we've talked about today. We've got color coding our notes. We've got CSA theory, or moving from concrete to semi-concrete to abstract. We developed some concise steps for our students. We're developing assessments that gradually increase in difficulty. And then finally, we not only talked about reflecting, but we did a little bit of practice on our own. So, look, just to conclude, I just want to be totally real. Like, first year of teaching is definitely an experience. Here's hoping to you all. I think you guys are at that point in your year where you're hitting that slump. Just keep on going. You got this. You're going to do this. I hope I gave you a few new strategies that will pump you up and get you ready to head into that classroom tomorrow and just teach those kids like they've never been taught before. So, I'm going to leave my email address at the bottom in a link right down here. I hope I remember to do this. So if you need anything at all, please feel free to email me. Or, you know, you can always ask your teacher. I'm sure that they can get my contact info one way or another. So thank you all for taking the time to watch this video. I hope that you learned something useful today, and good luck.